The morning briefing room on Trilus Prime buzzed with quiet efficiency as holographic displays showed star charts spanning half the galaxy. Commander Axel's crystalline fingers traced patterns in the air, manipulating data streams that would have overwhelmed lesser minds. His 7-foot frame cast rainbow shadows through his translucent exoskeleton as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Outer Rim territories. "The primitives on Terra 3 have achieved basic interstellar travel," reported Science. Officer Null, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that marked her as one of the hegemony's finest analysts. "Their vessels use crude chemical propulsion, with minimal quantum shielding. Energy signatures suggest they're burning fossil fuels for primary power generation." Axel's internal processors hummed with amusement. After 3 centuries of careful observation, the humans were finally ready for integration into civilized society. The Trilacian hegemony had guided 47 species through this transition, each time bringing order and prosperity to chaotic, primitive worlds. Terra 3 would be no different. The holographic display shifted to show detailed scans of human settlements. Their cities sprawled across the planet's surface in seemingly random patterns, lacking the elegant geometric precision that marked truly advanced civilizations. Most amusing of all, the humans appeared to actively enjoy living on their harsh world. Weather monitoring stations showed they actually sought out dangerous storms for recreational purposes. "Biological analysis confirms our initial assessments," continued Nail. "Average human lifespan is remarkably short, approximately 80 of their local years. They require constant consumption of organic matter for energy, unlike our efficient photosynthetic enhancement systems. Most concerning is their apparent tolerance for their planet's unstable atmospheric conditions. The atmospheric readings made Axel's exoskeleton shiver involuntarily. Terra 3's air contained 21% oxygen, a highly corrosive gas that would slowly poison any civilized being. The atmospheric pressure readings showed constant fluctuation as massive weather systems churned across the planet's surface with violent intensity. Worst of all, the humans seemed to thrive in these conditions. "Recommendation?" Axel asked, though he already knew the answer. The hegemony's protocols were clear and had never failed. "Standard integration package," Null replied. "Diplomatic contact, cultural assessment, and peaceful assimilation into the hegemony as a client species. Their primitive technology and biological limitations make them ideal candidates for our guidance." Within days, the diplomatic fleet Eternal Dawn departed for Terra 3. The journey through quantum-folded space took mere hours, but Axel used the time to study everything known about human civilization. Their wars fascinated and horrified him in equal measure. Unlike civilized conflicts that were decided by superior technology and rational calculation, humans engaged in prolonged, brutal struggles that seemed to accomplish nothing except massive destruction. Yet somehow, they kept building. Every time their cities were destroyed, they constructed new ones. Every time their populations were decimated by disease or disaster, they multiplied again. Their stubborn persistence reminded Axel of certain parasitic organisms that refused to die despite overwhelming odds. The Eternal Dawn dropped out of Quantum Fold at the edge of Terra 3's solar system and immediately detected the approaching human vessel. It was a crude metal construction that looked more like an industrial facility than a proper starship. Chemical exhaust trails showed it was actually burning hydrocarbons for propulsion, a technology so primitive that Axel had to access historical databases to understand how it functioned. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," reported Communications Officer Vele. "They're using basic electromagnetic radiation, audio and visual only, no quantum encryption." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human face that made Axel's processors pause in surprise. Ambassador Reed appeared older than most humans Axel had observed, with gray hair and lined skin that spoke of decades spent enduring Terra 3's harsh conditions. But his eyes held an alertness that seemed almost predatory. "Welcome to our solar system," Reed said in accented galactic standard, his pronunciation crude but understandable. "I represent the United Colonial Defense Council of Earth. We've been expecting you." The admission surprised Axel. Long-range sensors should have detected any advanced surveillance technology, but the humans had somehow known of their approach. Perhaps they possessed more sophisticated equipment than initial scans had suggested. "Greetings, Ambassador Reed," Axel replied, his translator rendering his harmonic speech into human comprehensible sounds. "I am Commander Axel of the Trilasian, Hegemony. We come in peace to offer your species a place among the stars." Reed's face showed what Axel's cultural databases identified as a smile, though something about the expression seemed wrong. Human smiles were supposed to indicate pleasure or friendliness, but this one carried undertones that made Axel's threat assessment subroutines activate. The negotiations proceeded according to standard protocol aboard the Eternal Dawn. Reed toured the ship's facilities with apparent wonder, asking simple questions about Trilasian technology and culture. He seemed appropriately impressed by their achievements and properly respectful of their obvious superiority. "Your offer is generous," Reed said as they concluded the formal presentation. "But as you can imagine, this decision affects our entire species. I'll need to consult with Earth's governing council before we can provide an answer." Axel nodded graciously. Most primitive species required time to overcome their initial fear and accept the benefits of hegemony membership. "Of course. How long will you require?" "One standard galactic cycle should be sufficient," Reed replied. As the human shuttle departed, Axel felt confident in the outcome. The humans had no choice, really. The hegemony controlled trade routes, advanced technology, and communication, networks throughout this region of space. Species that refused integration invariably found themselves isolated and struggling until they reconsidered. But as Axel watched Reed's primitive vessel disappear into the quantum foam, something nagged at his consciousness. The human ambassador had shown none of the desperate eagerness that usually marked first contact with primitive species. If anything, he had seemed almost calculating. Nal approached with a final report on human psychology. "Commander, there's something unusual in their behavioral patterns. Most species at this technological level show clear submission responses when confronted with superior force. The humans appear to lack these instincts entirely." Axel dismissed the concern with a gesture. 3 centuries of successful integration had proven the hegemony's methods. Terra 3 would be no different, regardless of whatever minor cultural quirks the humans might possess. He was already planning the next phase of integration when Reed's shuttle reached Terra 3 and began broadcasting a message that would change everything. "Defense Council, this is Reed. They're exactly what we expected. Begin preparations immediately." The war room beneath Geneva's mountains had seen many crises, but nothing quite like this. General Torres stood before a massive display showing Earth's entire colonial network, from the mining stations around Saturn to the research outposts near Alpha Centauri. Red indicators blinked across the map as humanity's scattered forces began moving with purpose that would have impressed their alien observers if they had understood what they were seeing. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres began, addressing the assembled leaders of Earth's defense forces, "we have been handed the opportunity of several lifetimes. Our new alien friends have made the classic mistake of underestimating us based on our technology rather than our capabilities." Ambassador Reed's full report played on screens around the room. The recording showed every detail of his meeting with Commander Axel, from the Trilasians' obvious superiority complex to their complete misunderstanding of human nature. Most importantly, it revealed their weaknesses. Dr. Kim, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, stepped forward with data that made everyone in the room sit up straighter. The Trilasians evolved on a world with 0.6 Earth gravity and minimal atmospheric pressure variation. Their exoskeletons are designed for stable, predictable conditions. Their quantum processing brains require calm environments to function at peak efficiency. In other words, Torres translated, they're built for a universe that doesn't exist. Laughter rippled through the room, but it wasn't entirely pleasant. These were people who had grown up on a world where hurricanes, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions were routine inconveniences. The idea that an entire civilization could develop without learning to handle chaos struck them as almost incomprehensibly naive. "What's our tactical assessment?" asked Admiral Chen, commander of Earth's small but growing space navy. "They're technologically superior in every measurable way," Reed admitted. "Their ships are faster, their weapons more powerful, their defenses nearly impenetrable by conventional standards. In a straight fight using their rules, we would lose badly." "Good thing we don't fight by their rules," Torres replied. Across Earth and its colonies, the response began immediately. It wasn't panic or desperate preparation for surrender. Instead, humanity did what it had always done when faced with overwhelming odds. They got creative. Research stations throughout the solar system began sharing technical specifications that had been classified for decades. The fusion drives that powered Earth's cargo haulers were actually miniaturized versions of weapons designed to function in combat conditions. The hull plating that protected colonial transports from space debris could withstand impacts that would cripple more elegant alien vessels. Most importantly, humanity's approach to space technology had been shaped by Earth's hostile environment. Every system had backups, every component was designed to keep working under extreme stress, and every ship was built to protect human crews from conditions that would kill most other known species. Colonel Brooks recently returned from the Titan. Mining colonies provided the most disturbing intelligence. "Our people out there have been adapting to low-gravity, high-radiation environments for decades. The physical conditioning alone would probably kill most aliens, but our folks are thriving. Some of the miners have been working in hard vacuum. For so long, they barely need life support anymore." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just conquered their Deathworld home. They had taken those survival skills to the stars and adapted them for even harsher conditions. What looked like primitive technology to the aliens was actually engineering designed for the worst possible circumstances. "They think we're weak because we need robust systems," Dr. Kim observed. "They don't understand that we build things tough, because our environment taught us that elegant solutions don't survive contact with reality." Intelligence reports from deep space monitoring stations painted a clearer picture of the galactic political situation. The Trilation hegemony controlled dozens of star systems, each populated by species that had accepted integration rather than face isolation. It was a pattern that had repeated across centuries of galactic expansion, but there were gaps in the pattern. Whole regions of space were marked as uninhabitable or quarantine zones in Trilasian databases. When human explorers had investigated these areas, they found perfectly normal stellar environments that presented no obvious dangers. They avoid anywhere that might be challenging, Reed realized. Their entire civilization is built on the assumption that the universe should be comfortable and predictable. Orders went out across human space. Colonial Marines began returning from frontier assignments, but not to defend Earth. Instead, they were being positioned throughout the solar system, in ways that made no tactical sense to conventional military thinking. Cargo ships started carrying unusual loads, and research vessels began broadcasting technical specifications that seemed completely unrelated to defense. The alien monitoring stations orbiting at the edge of the system detected increased human activity but interpreted it as the panicked scurrying of an inferior species facing inevitable defeat. They logged the movements in their reports but saw no pattern worth investigating. 2 weeks before the Trilasian deadline, Torres received a message that changed everything. It came from the research station orbiting Neptune, where Dr. Martinez had been conducting experiments in extreme environment survival. "General, you need to see this. We've been testing human survival capabilities under conditions similar to what our intelligence suggests exist on Trilation homeworlds. The results are remarkable." The data was shocking, even to people who thought they understood human resilience. Volunteers had survived in atmospheric conditions that should have been instantly lethal, functioned normally in gravitational fields that should have crushed them, and adapted to environmental changes that should have caused immediate system failure. We're not just tougher than they think, Dr. Martinez concluded. We're operating on completely different biological principles. What kills them might not even slow us down. As the deadline approached, humanity made its final preparations. The response wouldn't be desperate resistance or clever negotiation. Instead, they were preparing to introduce the galaxy to concepts it had forgotten existed. Adaptation, resilience, and the kind of stubborn refusal to give up that only came from evolving on a world that was actively trying to kill you. Reed prepared. His response to the Trilasian ultimatum. It was simple, direct, and carried undertones that would soon echo across the galaxy. Humanity respectfully declines your generous offer. We invite you to try and make us accept it. The message was broadcast not just to Commander Axel, but to every monitoring station and listening post within 50 light years. The galaxy was about to learn why deathworlds produce different kinds of intelligent life, and why the universe's most hostile environments sometimes created its most dangerous survivors. The quantum fold disruption alarms screamed across the bridge of the Trilasian flagship Eternal Dawn as 12 human vessels materialized from hyperspace in what could charitably be called a formation. Commander Axel studied the primitive fleet. Through sensors that could analyze molecular structures from light years away, and what he saw made his crystalline processor cores hum with confusion. The human ships looked like they had been assembled in a scrapyard. Mismatched hull plating, exposed structural beams, and exhaust systems that leaked radiation in patterns that violated every known principle of efficient engineering. Most bizarre of all, the ships seemed to be held together with some kind of metallic bonding agent that sensors identified as simple steel welding. "Commander," reported Science Officer Nal, her harmonic voice carrying overtones of disbelief. "The human vessels are broadcasting what appears to be music. Crude audio transmissions at volumes that would damage most species' auditory systems." Music was indeed crude by Trilasian standards, consisting of rhythmic percussion and tonal patterns that seemed designed to elevate heart rates and adrenaline production. Axel's cultural analysis programs identified it as belonging to a human musical category called rock, which appeared to be associated with aggression and tribal bonding behaviors. "Incoming transmission from the lead human vessel," Nal continued. "The sender identifies as Captain Walsh of the Earth Defense Force." Walsh's face appeared on the main screen, and Axel immediately noticed details that his earlier assessment had missed. The human's skin showed evidence of extensive exposure to radiation that would have been lethal to any civilized species. Scars crossed his features in patterns that suggested he had survived multiple traumatic injuries. Most disturbing was his expression, which showed no fear despite facing a technologically superior force. "Welcome to our neighborhood," Walsh said, his crude pronunciation making the translator systems work harder than usual. "Population consists of everyone tough enough to survive here. You folks looking to join up, or are you just passing through?" Axel activated the standard diplomatic protocols that had successfully intimidated 47 previous species. "I am Commander Axel of the Trilasian hegemony. Your species has rejected our generous offer of integration. This fleet is here to convince you to reconsider that decision." Walsh's face twisted into what the cultural database identified as a grin, though this particular expression seemed far more threatening than the friendly gesture it was supposed to represent. "Well now, Commander, that sounds an awful lot like a threat. We don't take kindly to threats in these parts." "This is not a threat," Axel replied calmly. This is simply the inevitable result of refusing to join civilized galactic society. Isolated species invariably recognize the benefits of hegemony membership once they understand their alternatives. Alternatives, huh? Walsh glanced off-screen for a moment, apparently consulting with his crew. Boys, the aliens think they're going to give us some alternatives. What do you think about that? The responses from Walsh's crew were mostly unprintable in any civilized language, but the tone was unmistakably eager rather than fearful. Axel's threat assessment programs began generating warnings as they detected elevated biometric readings from every human vessel. Heart rates, adrenaline levels, and neural activity patterns all suggested the humans were entering some kind of combat-ready state. Captain Walsh, Axel tried once more. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Your primitive vessels cannot hope to match Trilasian military technology. Surely you recognize the futility of resistance? Walsh leaned back in his command chair, and his grin got even wider. Commander, you're making the same mistake everyone makes when they first meet humans. You're assuming we're going to play by your rules. The human ships suddenly broke formation, not in any pattern that tactical computers could predict, but in what appeared to be barely controlled chaos. 3 vessels accelerated directly toward the Trilasian fleet at speeds that should have liquefied their crews. 2 others began spinning on multiple axes while broadcasting jamming signals that interfered with quantum targeting systems. The remaining ships simply disappeared from sensors entirely, using some kind of primitive stealth technology that somehow worked better than it had any right to. Impossible, Nal whispered as her instruments showed human vessels performing maneuvers. That violated basic physics. They're pulling acceleration forces that should crush their internal structures. What the Trilasians didn't understand was that human ships were designed by beings who thought nothing of experiencing multiple gravities during recreational activities. The structural reinforcement that looked crude and excessive to alien eyes was actually the minimum necessary to keep human crews functional during combat maneuvers. The first collision came without warning. A human vessel designated Defiant rammed the Trilasian cruiser Harmony at a relative velocity that should have vaporized both ships. Instead, the human ship's reinforced prow punched through the Trilasian vessel's elegant energy shielding and kept going, its crew somehow surviving an impact that registered as a small nuclear explosion. How are they still alive? Axel demanded. As his sensors showed, the Defiant was not only intact, but actually accelerating for another attack run. The answer came from Captain Walsh's ship as it closed with the eternal dawn. Commander, the thing you need to understand about humans is that we evolved on a world that's been trying to kill us for millions of years. We got really good at not dying. Boarding actions began as human vessels latched onto Trilasian ships with crude magnetic grapples. What happened next violated every principle of civilized warfare that the hegemony had developed over centuries of conflict. Human Marines didn't advance in organized formations or follow tactical doctrines. They simply charged through whatever obstacles they encountered, shrugging off weapons fire that should have incapacitated them, and continuing to fight under conditions that should have been instantly lethal. Private Davis became legendary when security footage showed him continuing combat operations after explosive decompression blew him into hard vacuum. Instead of dying from the sudden pressure loss like any sane being would, he used his magnetic boots to walk along the hull of a Trilasian ship, found an airlock, and forced his way back inside to continue fighting. Medical analysis shows the human survived 3 minutes in hard vacuum, reported Chief Medical Officer Cole, her voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. Vacuum exposure should cause immediate unconsciousness, followed by death within 90 seconds, for any known species. The Trilasian retreat began not because of military defeat, but because of simple terror. These weren't civilized beings following understandable rules of warfare. These were creatures that treated lethal environments as minor inconveniences and seemed to actually enjoy combat under impossible conditions. As the surviving Trilasian vessels fled toward the edge of the solar system, every monitoring station and intelligence network within 100 light-years received the same transmission. It was a simple message from Admiral Chen, broadcast on all frequencies in every known galactic language. To any species considering hostile action against humanity, we are what happens when evolution takes place on a Class 12 death world. We are the children of a planet that kills everything it can't make stronger. We have spent millions of years learning how to survive in conditions that would destroy your civilizations in minutes. If you come in peace, you will find no better friends in the galaxy. If you come in war, you will discover why nothing in the universe fears death more than the things that learn to beat it. Choose wisely. The message reached the galactic capital within hours, where it was analyzed by every major species intelligence services. The conclusion was unanimous and terrifying. Humanity wasn't just another primitive species that had gotten lucky. They were something the galaxy had never encountered before. They were survivors from a world that should never have produced intelligent life, and they had brought their world's lessons to the stars. Deep within the galactic archives on Sanctuary Prime, Dr. Vell worked through the night cycle analyzing data that challenged everything known about biological development and planetary classification. The ancient Korth who maintained the archives had given him unlimited access to records spanning millions of years, but nothing in those vast databases prepared him for what he was discovering about Terra 3 and its impossible inhabitants. The preliminary report from the Trilasian defeat had arrived 12 hours ago, carried by the fastest quantum-fold messenger drones in known space. Military analysts across 47 star systems were trying to understand how a primitive species had not only resisted hegemony integration, but actually defeated a modern battle fleet. The answer, Vell was beginning to realize, lay not in human technology, but in human biology. Archive Node 7, display planetary classification standards, he commanded, his 6 arms manipulating holographic controls with practiced efficiency. The display showed the standard scale used by every major civilization for the past 50,000 years. Class 1 worlds were paradise planets with stable climates and gentle ecosystems. Class 12 worlds were designated as unsurvivable death traps, where no intelligent life could possibly develop. Terra 3 rated as a Class 12 world on every possible measurement. The planet's gravity was nearly twice what most species considered optimal. Its atmospheric composition included 21% oxygen, a gas so reactive that prolonged exposure would slowly oxidize most known organic compounds. Weather systems regularly generated wind speeds that could level cities, while tectonic activity made the surface unstable and unpredictable. Most shocking of all was the planet's native ecosystem. Every other world that had produced intelligent life was characterized by cooperation and symbiosis between species. Terra 3's biosphere was based on constant, violent competition where survival required defeating or consuming everything else. In the environment. Biological analysis of human specimens, Vell continued, pulling up data that made his sensory organs contract with sympathetic pain. Human bone density was 3 times greater than any other known intelligent species. Their cardiovascular system included redundant organs that could maintain function even after catastrophic damage. Most incomprehensible was their neural architecture, which seemed designed to maintain consciousness and decision-making capability under extreme stress conditions. But the physiological data was only the beginning. Cultural analysis revealed behavioral patterns that were equally disturbing to civilized minds. Humans engaged in activities called extreme sports that deliberately exposed them to potentially lethal conditions for entertainment purposes. They consumed ethyl alcohol, a substance that was literally toxic to most life forms, as a social bonding ritual. They actually sought out challenging environments for recreational activities they called adventure travel. The report that emerged from Vell's analysis would be studied by xenobiologists for generations to come. His conclusion was as simple as it was terrifying. Humans weren't just another intelligent species that happened to be unusually tough. They were the product of evolutionary pressures that no other known world had ever produced. Humans represent a completely unprecedented form of intelligent life, Vell wrote in his preliminary findings. They are, quite literally, the survivors of a planetary environment that should have precluded the development of complex consciousness. Instead of being shaped by their world into beings capable of avoiding danger, they were shaped into beings capable of surviving anything their world could throw at them. The implications rippled across galactic civilization faster than information had ever traveled before. Within days, trade routes began shifting away from human-controlled space not out of hostility, but out of sheer caution. If humans could survive conditions that would kill any other known species, what did that mean for normal diplomatic and commercial interactions? Military advisors reached unanimous conclusions that were quietly distributed among all major powers. Avoid conflict with humans at any cost. The Trilasian defeat hadn't been a fluke or the result of superior technology. It was the inevitable result of an evolutionary arms race between intelligence and an environment that had been trying to eliminate that intelligence for millions of years. Economic analysts painted an even more disturbing picture. Human industrial technology, which had appeared primitive and inefficient, was actually over-engineered to function in conditions that would destroy more elegant systems. Their ships could operate in radiation fields, temperature extremes, and gravitational anomalies that would cripple vessels designed for stable environments. They don't build things to work optimally, observed Trade Minister Hex of the Altarian Confederation. They build things to keep working when everything goes wrong. In a galaxy where everything eventually goes wrong, that may be the ultimate competitive advantage. Cultural exchanges became exercises in mutual incomprehension. Human entertainment included dramatic presentations where characters faced impossible odds and somehow prevailed through determination and ingenuity. Other species' entertainment focused on harmony, beauty, and the celebration of order. The difference in perspectives was so fundamental that psychologists began to question whether humans and other species could ever truly understand each other. Dr. Mex, the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies psychology, published a report that became required reading for any diplomat assigned to human contact duties. Humans appear to find meaning in struggle itself, she observed. Other species seek to minimize difficulty and maximize comfort. Humans actively seek out challenging situations and derive satisfaction from overcoming obstacles that would cause other species to flee. The most unsettling discovery came from archaeological analysis of human history. Every other intelligent species had developed civilization by learning to cooperate and minimize conflict. Human civilization had developed through a process of constant warfare, environmental challenges, and competition for limited resources. They had learned to work together not to avoid struggles, but to survive them. Religious and philosophical leaders across the galaxy began incorporating the human paradox into their teachings. Here was a species that had achieved intelligence, not by transcending their world's violence, but by embracing it. They had developed technology not to escape their harsh environment, but to thrive in it. They had reached for the stars not to find peace, but to find new challenges. They are what we might have become, reflected Elder Sim of the Peaceful Unity movement, if our worlds had been cruel instead of kind. The question is whether that makes them dangerous to us, or whether it makes us vulnerable to everything else. Within 6 months of the Trilasian defeat, human space had become a region that other species approached with extreme caution, not because humans were hostile, but because they represented something that challenged every assumption about how intelligent life was supposed to develop. Trade delegations brought gifts of rare elements and advanced technology, only to discover that humans were more interested in environmental data and survival challenges. Tourism advertisements for human worlds carried warning labels that would have been considered insulting for any other species, but were apparently necessary for human destinations. The galaxy was learning to live with the knowledge that somewhere, in the Outer Rim territories, a species existed that viewed the universe's deadliest environments as interesting places to visit. They were learning that intelligence could develop along paths that previous science had considered impossible. Most importantly, they were beginning to wonder what other assumptions about the nature of life and consciousness might be wrong. If Terra 3 could produce beings like humans, what other impossible worlds might be harboring forms of intelligence that conventional wisdom said couldn't exist? The galaxy had always been vast and mysterious, but the discovery of humanity had made it seem infinitely more strange and dangerous than anyone had imagined. The invitation arrived through channels that technically didn't exist, delivered by beings who officially had no contact with human civilization, requesting a meeting that would never appear in any historical record. Ambassador Reed found himself aboard a ship that seemed to be constructed from crystallized time itself, facing entities that had watched the rise and fall of galactic civilizations since before Earth's sun had finished forming. Elder Nim of the Korth Collective was ancient. Beyond human comprehension, her form shifting between energy and matter in ways that hurt to observe directly. When she spoke, reality itself seemed to pause and listen, as if the universe recognized the weight of words spoken by beings who remembered when the galaxy was young. "Welcome, young Deathworlder," Nim said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. "We have been waiting for your species to mature enough for this conversation. The waiting has been longer than we hoped, but shorter than we feared." Reed had prepared for many possible scenarios during his journey to this impossible meeting, but he hadn't expected to be called a Deathworlder, as if it were a technical classification rather than an insult. The translator system struggled with concepts that apparently had no equivalent in human languages. "Elder Nim," Reed replied carefully, "with respect, we're still learning our place in galactic civilization. Until recently, we believed we were alone in the universe." Nim's form flickered with what might have been amusement. "Alone? Child, you were never alone. You simply lived on a world so hostile that no other form of intelligent life could visit you until you developed the ability to leave it yourselves. Terra 3 has been watched for millions of years, waiting to see what kind of consciousness would eventually emerge from its crucible." The revelation that Earth had been observed for geological ages should have been disturbing, but Reed found himself more curious than concerned. The Korth clearly operated on timescales that made human history seem like a brief moment of interesting activity. "You called me a Deathworlder," Reed said. "I assume that's not just a description of where we come from." "Deathworlder is indeed a classification," Nim confirmed. "Every few million years, a species emerges from a world so hostile that survival requires abilities that other forms of life cannot develop. These species inevitably change the nature of galactic civilization when they achieve interstellar travel. The ship's environment shifted around them, displaying holographic records of previous Deathworlder species. Reed saw beings of impossible diversity, but all sharing certain characteristics: enhanced physical capabilities, redundant biological systems, and psychological profiles that showed comfort with conditions that would terrify other species. "The last Deathworlders were the Builders," Nim continued. "They emerged approximately 4 million years ago from a world of constant volcanic activity and toxic atmospheric conditions. Like humans, they were dismissed as primitive by the civilizations of their time. Like humans, they proved that assessment catastrophically wrong." The holographic display showed structures that defied comprehension: space habitats larger than solar systems, engineering projects that manipulated fundamental forces, technology that seemed to operate on principles that physics had yet to discover. Then, abruptly, the displays went dark. "What happened to them?" Reed asked. "They transcended," Nim replied simply. "As Deathworlders always do, eventually. They outgrew the need for physical existence and departed for dimensions we cannot follow. But they left behind tools and knowledge that we have used to maintain galactic stability in their absence." Reed began to understand the implications. "You're telling me that human civilization is following a pattern, that we're not unique in the galaxy, just rare." "Precisely. Deathworlders serve a crucial function in galactic evolution. Most species develop intelligence as a way of avoiding environmental challenges. They become sophisticated, comfortable, and ultimately stagnant. Deathworlders develop intelligence as a way of conquering environmental challenges. They become adaptable, innovative, and ultimately transcendent. The ship changed course, heading toward regions of space that didn't appear on any human star charts. Nim explained that they were traveling to the frontier zones, areas of the galaxy that most civilizations avoided due to dangerous conditions or unknown threats. "The galaxy contains wonders and terrors in equal measure," she said. "Most species survive by avoiding the dangerous regions and focusing on the safe, predictable areas where civilized life can flourish. But the dangerous regions continue to exist, and some of the things that live there have never learned to respect the boundaries that civilized species depend on." They emerged from hyperspace near a space station that looked like it had been grown rather than built, its organic curves somehow more threatening than any weapon system Reed had ever seen. Sensor readings showed it was larger than Earth's moon and composed of materials that shouldn't have been able to exist in normal space-time. "A hunger ship," Nim explained, "built by entities that consume energy patterns rather than matter. They've been slowly working their way through this galaxy for approximately 50 million years, converting entire star systems into forms of energy they can digest. Most species flee when they detect hunger ship activity." Reed watched his instruments as human-designed scanners analyzed the alien structure. Where other species saw an incomprehensible threat, human engineering minds saw a problem to be solved. The hunger ship was vast and powerful, but it followed physical laws that could be understood and exploited. "What do Deathworlders typically do about threats like this?" Reed asked. "They find ways to fight them," Nim replied. "The builders developed weapons that could disrupt the hunger ship's energy conversion processes. Before the builders, the crystalline collective created defenses that could withstand hunger ship attacks long enough for evacuation. Each Deathworlder species approaches the problem differently, but they all approach it instead of fleeing from it." The tour continued through regions of space that Reed realized represented every nightmare that kept galactic civilizations awake at night. Ancient AI constructs that had outlived their creators and now pursued incomprehensible agendas among dead star systems. Reality distortion zones where the laws of physics had been damaged by weapons from forgotten wars. Dark spaces between galaxies where things that should not exist continued to hunt for prey among the stars. The Korth have been holding the line against these threats for millions of years, Nim explained, as they observed a patrol fleet engaging something that registered on sensors as a living nebula with hostile intentions. "But we are guardians, not warriors. We can contain and delay, but we cannot eliminate. That requires the kind of aggressive innovation that only Deathworlders possess." Reed studied the tactical displays as Korth vessels used technology beyond human understanding to drive the hostile entity back into deep space. Their methods were elegant and effective, but ultimately defensive. They were playing not to lose, rather than playing to win. "Why haven't you recruited other Deathworlder species before?" Reed asked. "We have tried," Nim admitted. "But most Deathworlders transcend too quickly. They solve the immediate threats and then lose interest in maintaining galactic stability. The builders lasted only 50,000 years before they moved beyond physical existence. The crystalline collective remained active for twice that long, but they eventually evolved into energy beings and departed for higher dimensions. The implications were sobering. Humanity was being offered a chance to join an ancient struggle against threats that could destroy galactic civilization, but with the understanding that success would eventually lead to their own departure from normal reality. "What makes you think humans will be different?" Reed asked. Nim's form shifted to something that might have been a smile. "Because humans are the first Deathworlders to develop pack-bonding behaviors with other species. Your culture includes concepts of loyalty and protection that extend beyond your own kind. You may be the first Deathworlder species capable of caring about what happens to the galaxy after you transcend." They returned to human space through regions that Reed now understood were buffer zones maintained by Korth technology to keep the galaxy's worst threats contained. The journey gave him time to process an offer that would fundamentally change humanity's future. "The choice is yours to make," Nim said as they approached Earth's outer sensor networks. "Remain isolated and develop along your natural trajectory, or accept the role that your evolution has prepared you for. But understand that isolation is temporary. The threats we guard against will eventually find your worlds whether you join us or not." Reed thought about the human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems, each one a testament to humanity's refusal to accept limitations imposed by hostile environments. He thought about the miners working in the radiation fields around neutron stars, the explorers pushing into uncharted regions that other species marked as too dangerous to investigate, the researchers who treated every impossible problem as an interesting challenge. "We'll need time to discuss this with our leadership," Reed said finally. "Of course. But do not take too long. The ancient threats grow stronger while the Korth grow fewer. We have maintained our vigil for 4 million years since the last Deathworlders departed, but we cannot maintain it forever." The return to Earth brought Reed face to face with leaders who had already begun to suspect that humanity's destiny lay beyond the comfortable boundaries that other species accepted. General Torres listened to the full report with the expression of someone who had been expecting exactly this kind of impossible responsibility. "So we're being offered a job as the galaxy's troubleshooters," Torres summarized. "Deal with the problems that are too dangerous for civilized species to handle, with the understanding that we'll eventually evolve beyond the need for physical existence and leave the job to whoever comes next." "That appears to be the pattern," Reed confirmed. "Doctor," Kim raised the question that everyone was thinking. "What happens to the galaxy if we say no?" "The Korth continue their holding action until they can't anymore," Reed replied. "And then the threats they've been containing start spreading through civilized space. Based on what I saw out there, most species wouldn't last long against even one of those entities. The decision took less time than anyone expected. When the vote came, it was unanimous among Earth's leadership and overwhelmingly supported by the colonial governments. Humanity would accept their role as the galaxy's newest Deathworlders. The announcement was broadcast across human space on all frequencies. Earth Defense Force is now accepting applications for frontier patrol duty. Warning: Deathworld species only. All others need not apply. Within weeks, human ships began patrolling the dangerous regions that other species avoided. They worked alongside Korth vessels, learning to use technologies that had been perfected over geological time spans while contributing innovations that could only come from beings who viewed impossible problems as interesting challenges. The galaxy watched with a mixture of terror and relief as humanity began doing what Deathworlders had always done, taking responsibility for the survival of everyone else. For the first time in 4 million years, the ancient threats that lurked in the dark spaces between stars faced opponents who were not just trying to contain them, but actively working to eliminate them permanently. The age of human Deathworlders had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.